As fears of Russian invasion loom over Ukraine, the United States has dramatically raised the alarm, warning that a Russian invasion could begin within days. The White House said that a Russian invasion, starting with civilians being caught under aerial bombing, could begin any time, even before the end of the Beijing Olympics, which is by the 20th of February. The United States has urged its citizens to leave Ukraine within 48 hours.
To see signs of Russian escalation, including new forces arriving at the Ukrainian border. As we've said before, we are in the window when an invasion could begin at any time, should Vladimir Putin decide to order it. I will not comment on the details of our intelligence information, but I do want to be clear. It could begin during the Olympics, despite a lot of speculation that it would only happen after the Olympics. If a Russian attack on Ukraine proceeds, it is likely to begin with aerial bombing and missile attacks that could obviously kill civilians without regard to their nationality. A subsequent ground invasion would involve the onslaught of a massive force. With virtually no notice, communications to arrange a departure could be severed and commercial transit halted. No one would be able to count on air or rail or road departures once military action.
According to Russian state news agency, Moscow is pulling out troops and pulling out employees of its diplomatic mission in Ukraine. According to the agency, the Russian decision came after some Western countries announced evacuation. In a few hours from now, US President Joe Biden will speak to Russian President Vladimir Putin. World leaders who have been a part of the diplomatic talks aimed at Russian de-escalation will be monitoring all of the developments from the Biden-Putin talks. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken will also speak to his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov. Sources say the United States President Joe Biden also met his national security advisors in the White House Situation Room to discuss Russia's ongoing military buildup. As for the sources, leading US officials believe that the crisis appeared to be reaching a critical point, with Moscow hardening its rhetoric by sending warships to the Black Sea and adding more military equipments in Belarus. Russia and Belarus continue to hold joint military drills less than 100 kilometers from Kyiv. Images by the Russian Defense Ministry show tank drills and paratrooper landings during the joint drills. Top US General Mark Milley spoke to his Russian counterpart, General Valery Gerasimov. In a rare phone call, the two generals discussed several security-related issues of concern, details of which have not been revealed. The telephone call is not the first between the two generals. They last spoke on the 23rd of November, discussed Russian troop movements around Ukraine. While Russia is sending in more troops near the Ukrainian border, the United States and NATO are trying to match its deployment. The United States said that it is sending 3,000 more troops to Poland to reassure NATO allies amid fears of Russian invasion. These 3,000 airborne troops based at the Fort Bragg in North Carolina will now leave the base in the coming days. They are expected to arrive in Poland early next week. United States also reassured its support to Ukraine. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke to his Ukrainian counterpart, said that Ukraine will have enduring support from the United States for its sovereignty and territorial integrity. The growing alarm over the conflict comes despite efforts of shuttle diplomacy by the United States and the West. Earlier, French President Emmanuel Macron visited both Kiev and Moscow. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is expected to do the same in the coming week. But even while leaders hope that diplomacy will work out, the fear of an invasion is only growing. And for more insight on this, we are now being joined by a political analyst with Russian international news agency Sputnik, Dmitry Babich. Thank you so much for joining us at this point, Dmitry. President Joe Biden and Putin are going to hold talks. President Putin are going to hold talks. What can we expect out of it?
Well, I think that Putin will just ask Biden to stop the hysteria because it is not clear why the United States is so alarmist. The Ukrainian government itself, seeing the foreign investors pull their money out, seeing the foreign national flee the country en masse, the Ukrainian government said it saw no signs of a coming attack. As usual, the Ukrainian government is very hostile to Moscow, which is unfortunately their tradition since the coup of 2014, when the legally elected President Yanukovych was ousted and Ukraine suddenly became a state very hostile to Russia. But even President Zelensky is asking the Westerners not to create panic. So I wonder what will happen when this attack doesn't take place, neither during the Olympic Games or after the Olympic Games. how will the West explain its actions? Well, we have seen it, On many occasions, their warnings were not fulfilled, and they always said, this is just because we were vigilant. So I'm sure after this talk, in a few months, in a few weeks, Mr. Biden will tell Mr. Putin was just stopped by our determined response. The reality is Russia is not going to attack Ukraine. That would be a very stupid move, very unpopular in Russia. Yes, we support the Russian minority in Ukraine, which is mistreated by the new dictatorial government that they had since 2014. But we have no plans to attack it. And there was not a single border incident in the last at least 1 year. And there was no Russian official who would threaten Ukraine with an attack.
Right.
This is all made up, just like weapons of mass destruction in the hands of Saddam Hussein, or future arrest of gay athletes at the Russian Olympic Games. These warnings of the West were never realized.
Right. Now, a host of Western leaders rushed to Kiev and Moscow to break the deadlock. But the big question is, what could President Putin's next move be?
I wonder what President Biden's next move will be, because if the invasion doesn't happen, he will look like an idiot. So I think his next move will be to say that the attack didn't happen because we were vigilant. That will be his next move. I don't see any particular moves, pending on our side. During his meeting with President Macron, President Putin said very clearly, the real agenda is NATO expansion. We are asking NATO to stop the expansion, and we suggested talks on this issue. But instead of this real agenda, the West is kind of cards taken. They're replacing it with a fake agenda. The fake agenda is the impending Russian attack on Ukraine, which will never happen, of course.
Right. Also, how do you see India's role as the tensions continue to rise between West and Russia?
Well, I see that India is taking a very sober stand on this. India has just recently hosted President Putin. And of course, it was not a visit of a dictator. You remember how open and how democratic our discussions were. I think India has a more realistic view of what's going on the territory of the former Soviet Union, because India itself saw what happens when empires collapse and how Western powers are using certain tensions between ethnic groups or between people of various religious confessions to stir trouble in the former empires. I think the Americans are now trying to make Russians and Ukrainians quarrel in the same way imperialist powers were trying to make Indian Muslims and Hindus quarrel. Unfortunately, they succeeded. And unfortunately, they succeeded now in Ukraine. But still, 99% of Russians, we consider Ukrainians to be just like us. We all speak the same language. We understand each other even better than Pakistanis and Indians. It's virtually the same language. We all watch the same television for most of our lives. We went to the same schools. There are millions of mixed families. So no one in Russia in his right mind would like to invade Ukraine or force Ukrainians to do what they don't want. What we are sad about is the terrible government that was forced on Ukraine in 2014 by imperialist powers. We saw how it happened during the so-called Maidan. It was a violent coup, openly supported by the Western governments. There was the German foreign minister, French foreign minister, Polish foreign minister who came to cheer the rebellion. And remember, in 2014, in February, these three ministers guaranteed the truce, peace between President Yanukovych and the opposition. The opposition broke that promise in a day, even less. And these three ministers were never protested. They just accepted what they called the revolution, which was in fact a violent change of government.
All right. Dmitry, thank you so much for joining us with all your inputs on this. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.